welcome again to this excellent episode of Crush Your Mountain Personal Growth. You know, when it comes to dealing with diversity and beauty, they really go hand in hand. The fact of the matter is that when you look in a garden, what makes a garden beautiful is the variety of flowers. What makes the heavens beautiful at night are the various intensities and subtle colors of the stars of the universe. It intrigues us, it brings us in, it gives us peace. It excites us. And that's why I am so thrilled to have with me a model and diversity advocate. Let me tell you a little bit about her. And she's got an incredible story. She's a globe trotter. And I don't mean Harlem Globetrotter. I mean, she's a globe trotter. She's too young to know about the Harlem Globetrotters, okay? But based in Brisbane, Australia, and adopted from a third world country, Frances Helena has spent her life traveling and living across the world. Currently, she holds her 7th passport. Growing up in a biracial household, Frances has grown to love nature, love travel, photography, culture, and music from all around the world. Not only is she an activist for human rights, but she has also created her fashion brand based on her life experiences. Now we're going to find out just why these things are so important and how it applies to all of us, especially now when we're actually beginning to see the beautiful mosaic that humanity, the human family is. Let me introduce to you Frances Helena. Frances Helena, welcome to Crush Your Mountain.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Uncle Henry, for having me.
She's the only one that calls me uncle, well, other than my kids. It is a pleasure to have you. She's one of my kids, I guess. You know, and so it's when we touched base and we talked. You were so intriguing, but you're also so full of joy and they say in French, joie de vivre. You know, and that's the joy of life. And I have to ask you this: why is diversity in fashion so important, especially now?
I think when we look at everything that's happened in the last couple of years, it's been 3 years now since the pandemic started. We've seen a lot of things like Black Lives Matter, Asian hate, violence against the elderly, gun violence. And when you look at all those things and you see the demographic that situation has, created, and now you look at things like the music industry, there's a lot of African-American artists collaborating with Latino artists or actual, African artists and things like that. I think, it really sends a message out there, and especially, things like gun violence. I personally haven't experienced gun violence, but I know people who have experienced gun violence, and they're from all different sorts of backgrounds, so it really send a message out there that really says that no matter where we live or where you come from, everybody can understand the experience of being discriminated against or being shot at or whatever the case is. And so what I've done with my brand, which is called Beautifully Diverse Fashion, is basically created something that basically says we as people, no matter where we live or where we're born or whatever we've experienced, we're still, at the end of the day, we're still people. We still have the same amount of bones, the same color blood. The only thing that makes us different is, where we've grown up, where we're born, where we're, the skin color and all this sort of thing. So our brand basically has a big age range from 16 to 50. So when I created it, I really wanted an all-rounder, but it wasn't really just about, being in the fashion industry. It was really about to also bring about change. We have people who are mothers, and people always look at mothers as, oh yeah, it's just a mom. But there's like one mother, she's actually coming from Canada. So she's a mother of two boys. She's a soccer mom, but she's also a makeup artist, you know. So there's lots of different, varieties of what people can do in their lives, not just be a mom or be a dad, you know, that people are actually doing things. And we have one lady, I used to study with her in Australia. So she was on a scholarship, and she's flying from Ghana. So and if you don't know where Ghana is, guys, it's in Africa, West Africa. And so she's literally flying from there. But it's basically to show that, and she's also a domestic violence survivor as well. But she basically, to show that people, no matter what they've experienced, they can still be successful in what they're doing. And it's also really to bring people together, to actually show people out there that we as people can still get along despite our differences, because it's not easy. Like, people always think that, you know, embracing diversity or creating diversity is easy. It's actually really hard to do, to
Well,
actually get people.
you said something interesting there. You know, you said embracing diversity. Is it easier to embrace diversity, or is it easier to encourage diversity? And what's the difference?
Well, I think that, there is actually, I guess there is a really big difference. Like, for example, I was raised in a biracial household. So my dad's actually white and my mom's Asian. And so both of them, they're born in the 50s and 60s, which is a completely different time to how it is now. You know, they grew up like my dad, for example, grew up in England. And he remembers the time where colored people and white people, you couldn't be in the same room as each other. You couldn't even like sit in, you know, the same bus or whatever. But he had always said to me, it's not about the person's skin color. It's about their personality. Because I always get people, they say things to me like, oh, you mix with this person or that person. I said, yes, because it's based on the personality. It has nothing to do with what they look like and everything like that. Like my dad, like, you know, we lived in places like Mexico, Malaysia, China. I literally lived in places where people didn't speak any English. Like where we lived in China was like so remote. So, you know, and the way my dad encouraged me to embrace diversity was to really get to know the people by like observing what they do, observing, you know, how they react, or, you know, and sometimes it kind of does backfire. Like I think when he lived in Mexico, he ordered pizza and there was a language barrier because he didn't speak Spanish. So it was just basically like by the time he ordered the pizza, there was just tomato and cheese all the way to the top. So, you know, it's those kind of things, but you learn from those things and you learn from those experiences, and you don't always get it right. And, you know, in embracing, so that's really about embracing diversity. But encouraging diversity is a little bit harder. Like, for example, my mom, she is from just one culture in Asia. So she's Filipino. And, you know, in the Philippines, because even though it's colonized by the US, which is predominantly a Caucasian country. So, you know, in Asia, the shift is a little bit different to say that if you're lighter, you're more socially acceptable, which has been, it goes back to thousands of years. Like now we see people like Naomi Osaka, Bruno Mars, you know, because Bruno Mars is like half, Latino and half Filipino. So, you know, we see all those kind of people, Joe Coy. And, you know, so it's things like encouraging diversity is a lot harder to do, because if you have to also watch what you say, and it's not easy to always watch what you say to certain people because they, you know, they might react differently. But if you look at people the way Bruno Mars or Joe, I can't even say it right now, Kuya Joe, I call him Kuya Joe, which means older brother. But yeah, him, or if anybody knows her, the musician, her, she's like half Filipino and half African American, the way they've created their platforms, it's not just about music, but it's also to say that they also encourage, like, everything that you read about them, they also talk about their culture, even though they're born in the US or whatever, they're still embracing that and they encourage that. So that's basically with what I try to do, is basically share my experiences about traveling or who I've met, and also the bad things about it, because everybody thinks, there's all good things about it. But I've even, even though I am a colored person, I've even been discriminated against by colored people. Like, I was in a bridal party, and I was the only person that wasn't of the same appearance as everybody else. So there was a little bit of a situation in there, and it was a pretty tough situation, but it was like a learning situation at the same time. But it goes to show that not everybody is, not everybody. I'm just thinking about it right now, but not everybody is willing to accept you for who you are, and it's not because they don't want to, it's because they've only grown up in a certain area that has allowed them to see that certain amount of exposure. So it's really actually not their fault.
So ignorance is a cultural thing and therefore learned?
Yeah, it's definitely a culture thing. Like, even just living in a biracial household with, like, my mom and dad. So, like, spelling, for example, because the Philippines is colonized by America, so everything's spelled with a Z. But because my dad's English, everything's spelled with an S. So there'd be some, like, debate about what language to use, even though it's all English. But, in saying that, even though my dad, is white, he loves, like, Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, Lionel Richie, that's all we played in our house, Pink Floyd, Phil Collins, like, whereas my mom, she really likes like country music. So, and a lot of country, you don't see a lot of colored people in, country music. So there's a big difference in there. But the one thing they do have in common is music. So music itself is not exactly a language. It's all about, like, sound and feel and emotion. So they were both really big on music. So I think that was really also a big part of it as well, apart from the culture difference.
Well, I certainly understand and appreciate what you're saying. I would suggest that music is a language of itself, and it can be more, and therefore more unifying in many ways. I think the two languages that know no bounds, so to speak, are music and mathematics. I'm not a mathematician, but you can use mathematics to define the universe. And the universe itself has its own melody, almost, and it's amazing when you think about it. So it's a way of communicating. And when you don't have that vibration, you can feel it. But when things are in harmony, when music is in harmony, when we recognize the oneness of all of us, then we ourselves vibrate and give off a certain music, if you will. You know what I mean? Like you and I always talk, okay? And after a while, we talk so much that it sounds like we're singing together, right? Because we're on the same page in many ways. And so that's the beautiful thing. Let me ask you this. Do you think that by means of bringing the shows that you have, bringing your experience to the shows, that it broadens the horizons of those that attend?
Well, that's the aim, really. That's the aim. So our show now, we had to postpone it because 6 team members took a family loss. So we postponed it to February. So we have a date, which is the 11th of February. And it's a Saturday, but we basically, when we did the September show and we we already had it organized and everything. So the crew that we have, so most of our New Jersey crew, some of them are from of Latino heritage, like Cuba, Puerto Rico, and then our photographer, he was of Italian heritage. So, we also asked those people to bring their family members along to see the show. And then, the girl coming from Ghana, her uncle and auntie live in New York City. So they were going to bring the whole Ghanaian community, So it was basically like we had everybody bringing different people. We had, I think, our youngest, she was like 16 and her brother's, I think, 17, but they were half African-American and Caucasian, as well as Guyana. Yeah, their dad was from Guyana. So they were going to bring all their relatives. So it was basically, we had all these different people from different, places. We even, and it was just basically like that was the kind of image and the message we wanted to send out. And it was also, with fashion, it's also about appearance. A lot of people focus on the appearance, but the way I focused it on this show was basically about, it's not just about how people look in different parts of the world or where they come from. It was also about the music, about how people celebrate life in, other parts of the world. Because with the pandemic, we've all been pretty sad, right? We've lost somebody, lost employment, whatever it may be. And, it's pretty much drove us crazy and stuff like that. So now is the time to make something, happy out of everything that everybody has, experienced. And so we timed it to music. And, with a lot of fashion shows, it's just like one whole track, but we had put a few different, tracks, and it was a way to get the group involved by getting them to select what track they wanted, even though each walk was probably about a minute and a half. So what we created was basically a storyline of like, how it was going to flow and actually tell a story about all these different people. But we were pretty much going to meet before the show and come together and all this. And it was really going to be a team effort. So I think, when people see that, and that's pretty much how we got selected, actually, because it was a random selection, out of 8 million people. So it was basically like about the lady that selected me was basically like, she liked it because it was about social change, and she had never seen anything like that. So it was like social change and fashion combined, and she was like, she really liked it. So I think, the message that we're trying to send out there is really about encouraging people and embracing, differences despite whatever is going on. So yeah, hopefully that's the aim of the message. And it seems to be working, because now I've been on, not just your podcast, but a few other podcasts, and the main focus of it is really about cultural diversity.
So that's going to be an amazing show. Now, when is the show and where is the show?
So it's going to be, I haven't even told the team yet. I'll tell them a bit later.
You might find out on this podcast.
It's basically, so it's Saturday, the 11th of February, and it'll be at Sony Hall. So which is in New York City, and we're headlining for Runway 7 Fashion. So they have like a September and a February season. So.
Wow. So I know it's going to be special. I know it's going to be great. Now, you yourself have modeled. I've seen you in several different magazines, and she's stunning, folks. Let me just tell you that she's absolutely a stunning shining star. And so tell us about how you got started just modeling itself.
So I lived in a country town. So and we have one university and 3 shopping centers, so every kid that went to the university, we all knew each other. But basically I had started during university just through like friends, and I was like, oh, this is fun. I think it was just something I always, wanted to do. And so, just we do a few snaps here and there, whatever. And then it wasn't until I moved to Brisbane, which is where I am right now, right? So it's been almost, I think, a year and a half. And I went back into it. And, you know, living in the city is it's so different living, you know, versus living in the country. You know, everything's on the go in the city, you know, it's just and, you know, you have to travel a little bit further and, you know, but but there's more opportunities in the city, you know, because in the country there's not a lot of opportunity, so you have to move away. And I went back into modeling, but from what I noticed, and this is how I also created the fashion brand. It was basically the fashion industry, and it still caters to skinny people, especially in Australia. It hasn't really adapted to you know, plus size models. Like there are some companies now, they're slowly getting into the whole plus size modeling. But, you know, in some ethnic cultures, some people are, you know, they are plus size, and it's actually a good thing. You know, they would be like, if you're bigger, you get more presents, you know, something like that. But, you know, you kind of like you're not frowned upon. Whereas in the West, we have kind of been taught that, oh, if you're skinny, you know, that's pretty much what a model is. But now the fashion industry is slowly changing to accepting plus size models, and it's starting to see a little bit more of diversity. It's still slow, but it's, you know, it's still getting there. And there was one situation particularly where I was modeling for, and they didn't have anything else for me to put on apart from this dress. So, and it was one of those flowy dresses. So I managed to fit into it, because the original outfit they were asking for, I couldn't get it on because my legs were too big. So, you know, and then there was a man, he was I think Middle Eastern descent. And so, but he had modeled, you know, across the Middle East, and he was a bigger size man, but they didn't have anything for him. And so, you know, I think that was, and it just occurred to me like, oh, you know, because the ad had said anybody can apply, right? So that's why we all went there. But then we get there, and it was kind of like the opposite. It was like, oh, everybody can apply, but, you know, it didn't really say anything about you had to be skinny. And so that's why I created the show. So I do like customized like outfits to fit the person, that kind of thing. Yeah.
That sounds beautiful. So many were called, but skinny were chosen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us this, you know, your own experiences in travel. You lived in Mexico, you lived in China. Where else have you been? And what are some of the more moving experiences that you've had? The things that really opened your eyes?
Where were we? I've been to Fiji. It was through the university, actually. There was a program called VESA, Volunteer Eco Students Abroad. And they basically do volunteer in Fiji, Ecuador, South America, or Laos. And so the founder actually had passed away during COVID. But when we went to Fiji, we stayed in the village, and there's no one else out there apart from, you know, a group of foreigners and people from the village. So it was pretty much just us, but we would stay with one of the families, and, you know, they would cook for us, everything, but we would stand down the school and put water tanks in, incinerators. And I think like having grown up in an environment where, well, culturally, family is important and everything like that. So my parents are now separated. And I think it really moved me just having seen that all these people in this small village, because there must have been less than 100 people in this village, maybe about 50 people. And so probably less than that actually. But like, they would every night they would all come together. We would all, after dinner, we go down to the community hall. We would drink kava, which is actually like a, how do I describe it? It's like a plant, and it was given to, you have to give it to the chief because it's still got chiefdom in Fiji, and basically they prepare it in a special way, but it's really, really strong, and it's pretty much like an alcoholic drink, but it knocks you out for a little bit because it's just too strong. But it's given to you in a little wooden bowl, and everybody has to have a sip. And you can say stop, but the first sip you have to have because it's just part of the tradition of the custom. So, but after a while you can get drunk on it. But we would be at this community hall and everybody would just be, singing and dancing. And it was just really nice just to see people come together. They're not living in a palace or anything, but they're just happy. And I think, that was probably a really moving experience because, it shows that no matter where you live in the world, or what your upbringing is, you have a choice to decide whether you want to be happy or not, and I think that really, especially where they live, like there's not much electricity, there's not exactly running water coming out from the everyday shower. We have I don't know what we call it in English. Well, in Mum's language, we call it, there's like a tabo, and it's basically, in English, it's like a bucket shower. So there's basically a bucket there, and you have this little scooper, and you just, scoop the water, and you just pour it on your head, and you gotta, there's a certain way to do it because there's not many, you gotta save water for other people that's going to have a shower, and the bucket, there's a certain size to it, so you can't just be using all the water. You have to, it's basically common sense and consumption. So yeah, I think it was really about those experiences has really I think shaped the way I kind of see other people. And then I've also had bad experiences when I've been traveling as well. I've actually been robbed of cash. I was actually sleeping at a friend or relative's house, and I ended up the next day with no money. And so I was lucky and very fortunate that the country, it's a country town, so I was going back to my mom's village and everything, and they already had put in an ATM machine and an actual like a bank place and everything, because before that wasn't there. So I was really lucky that I could get some money out of it and everything like that. So but I think the big thing for me is that I don't look at a bad experience as, oh, that's just it, where some people, they get really freaked out, but I've kind of used it as a way to channel that to other people, and sort of say like, look, if you're going to go traveling, then this is what you should do. But whether you decide to take my advice or not is completely up to you.
That's understandable, fully understandable. Well, you've done so many things in terms of helping individuals to broaden their horizons, to bring the idea of diversity in every shape or size and color. You've incorporated the music of the world in your fashion, and what I like is how that experience there in the community, showing how everyone cares for everyone else, even in the subtle things as saving water so that the next person can wash up too, how that translates to your vision in the fashion world in terms of being one people who care for one another and how we can move that on. That is such an amazing thing and incredible accomplishments on your level. I would have one more question for you. I want to thank you for spending time with me here and my folk. You are indeed an amazing lady, and your beauty shines through very, very clearly, because It comes from here and radiates out. And that makes you absolutely glowing. So I have one more question for you. Frances, Helena, what does it mean to you to crush your mountain?
Oh, thank you for that. I think when it comes to crushing your mountain, I think it's really important. Like it's not just about yourself. I was watching, actually, I think I was watching it last night. It's Frida, and hopefully I'm saying it right, Frida Gibbs. She was the first female African-American kickboxing world champion. And she was basically talking about it's what you're doing in your life, what your experiences. It's basically your experiences can shape the way you channel other people to see what you want to achieve. And so in her case, she grew up in a really rough area. And so she ended up, I think, she was pretty much raped, but because she was already taking lessons from her uncle on kickboxing, that basically, saved her from it. And then it wasn't until after that experience, she got a call from somebody to say that they asked her to fight the most, strongest woman in the world, and something like that, if strongest is the word. But basically, she was basically like, what? But her mom was saying, you have it in you, you just don't know it yet, but somebody needs to wake it up. And so I think for me personally, the thing that woke me up the most was basically just seeing, on the media, now media's just everywhere. So I think it was just seeing the amount of hate people have for like another race. And I'm not saying that we should ignore, what history has taught us or shown us. But I was also watching Red Table Talk, and Mr. Snoop Dogg was on there, and he said, we always talk about the bad things. Let's talk about the good things. And so, with what we're doing with this show, it's really important that we try to advocate that diversity can still exist amongst people, regardless of our age or where we come from. And so I think it's really important to make sure that when you get up to the mountain, that you have a team of people that are pushing you along the way and supporting you. And it doesn't have to be, family or friends, because not all family and friends are going to believe in you. You can meet other people who are doing similar things to you, and they can be the ones encouraging you. But, when you get up to the mountain, you better make sure that, you keep your head held high. And I think when Miss Frida Gibbs was talking about her experience, the ref was saying he never heard anything, so powerful in a room, because she won that fight. And she was the first, she got that title, the first female African-American world champion kickboxing. And so I think it's really important that when you get to that, stage, that there should be more than just a reason for doing it. There should be like a purpose as to what you're trying to achieve or put out there in the world.
Absolutely. Well, I want to again thank you so very much for that. The idea again of being there, having the support, and we never know where that support's going to come from. But it is across the board, of every color, of every race. In fact, I don't even like to use that word race, because the only race there is the human race. You see, and that's been genetically proven. Is it okay? So the idea of taking those who will support you and believe in you along and attacking your challenge and winning is a beautiful thing. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. I appreciate how you come across and really share this. Friends, again, if you can support Frances Helena in her show, that's going to be February the 11th at 7 p.m. And by the way, it's in New York City, my hometown. And it's also going to be, now what's the theater that's going to be, what's the venue?
It's at Sony Hall.
At Sony Hall. So if you can be at Sony Hall on February the 11th, okay, she will welcome you with open arms, and I hope to be there too. So if you see me, come say hey. And like we always say at the end of all of our shows, because it's so very true and so very important, don't just climb your mountain, crush through it, and we will see you next time. Thank you so very much, Helena.
Thank you.